All right, welcome to another episode of the BrainFood Show. In this one, we've left space behind, haven't we?
Unfortunately.
I don't know if it was unfortunate. I think it's about time. Did I get an email? Did someone leave us a review and they were like, 4 stars? I got a bit sick after space after episode 17.
Yeah.
Or whatever we got to. So I think it
was kind of funny because the original plan for today when I was first doing it was going to be something on Star Wars. And then I was like, oh no, I can't. Let's move on to something like history or something a little.
I think it's wise. What are we talking about today? Now, the title of the episode's got something to do on, this is always the working title, so I have no idea if this will be the final title, but when I saw it today, the working document that we both have in front of us, it's called Burke and Hare. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that really sounds like, like a Savile Row, which is like the big street of suits in London. Mm-hmm. It sounds like an outfitter. Yeah. Or a tailor, like, come to Burke and Hare for the finest in gentlemen's wear.
Well, it was for the finest in fresh bodies, actually. So,
absolutely.
It works, for a time.
The finest in fresh bodies, as we'll find out, alcohol-soaked bodies.
Yeah, it was where the physician got the best bodies from, Burke and Hare. You just order them up. We'll get into that, but yeah.
He probably didn't go to like a fancy Savile Row store, though.
No, it was more of a
as we will shortly see.
Backstreet type situation.
We're taking a little bit of let me just, we're having a slight change in structure today. As you know, this is I say this is like a new and evolving podcast. We are about 6 months into this thing, but I think, it
still feels new.
With evolution, it does still feel new, doesn't it? I don't know if that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I guess I remember one of the first reviews we got was like, this doesn't feel like one of those podcasts where they've been doing it for, endless years and they just sound bored. So I'm still, one day we'll get there and then we'll know we're veterans. Yeah. Anyway, so let me just say before we get started, if you want to contact us, tell us how we're doing, whether you like us to do more space episodes or not, you can email us at podcast@todayIfoundout.com. You can check our forums out where you can discuss the episode at podcast.todayIfoundout.com. It's all very easy to remember, isn't it? And we do have a review contest. So we're aiming... I think last time I checked, we're at 176 reviews on iTunes. So once we get to 200, we're giving away a $200 Amazon gift card to one lucky randomly selected winner from those first 200 reviews, and also on the other reviews on the other leading podcast platforms. So that is happening. And the way we're changing the structure a little bit is we're starting with a quick fact, right? We're just going to... I was like, we should definitely brand this. And then I came up with a terrible idea of calling it a brain starter. So obviously that needs work.
Snack or something.
Brain snack. Okay. So what is our brain starter / brain snack for today's episode?
So when we have the U.S. Postal Service, and in the early days, at some point they decided to start doing parcels, right? So they had parcel post service, and so they launched it, but they didn't actually have much in the way of rules. So when they launched it on January 1st, 1913, somebody got the idea, and then many other people picked up on it, that why not mail children? Like if you want to send your kid off to their grandparents' house, you can just literally, and this is literally what they would do, is affix the postage to their clothing along with an address and mail them.
It's not a bad idea.
No, because it turns out this is way cheaper. So like, for instance, on one of them, I'll get into it in a minute, but it was basically about a third of the price of sending them via train to send them via post.
I was also looking, how much was that? The first example I see, it was about like $3.72 today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's real cheap.
Yeah.
That's today's money to go by rail.
Yeah. And
was that post? Or was that? Yeah. Oh, that is cheap.
No, that is totally cheap. And that was about a third the price of a train ticket to the equivalent destination. So yeah, the first known case of this was Mr. and Mrs. Jesse something. Bew.
Dude, I don't know. It's your country.
That's definitely not an American sounding name. Buge.
I'd say Boge.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Yeah, that's probably good. So of Ohio.
Dude, I've got no idea.
It's a weird spelling. There's a lot of vowels in there. Anyways,
Beauge.
So yeah, they 3 weeks after the launch of Parcel Post, they decided to mail their son to his grandmother's house, and it was, as you said, 15 cents or about $3.72 today.
It's a good deal.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. And
Well, it depends how far the grandmother's house is, but I'm assuming it's not like a walk distance.
Couldn't have been that far because a train ticket, would be. But anyways, so then the next up on January 27th, 1913, so this again was just a few weeks later after the launch, Mr. and Mrs. J.W. Savis of Pennsylvania, they mailed their daughter to relatives for a fee of 45 cents, so that must have been a little further away.
3 times further away, perhaps.
Yeah, the most famous, of course, was in February of 1914. So this has been going on a year that people have been doing this. Finally, someone mailed a 5-year-old May Pierstoff of Idaho was mailed to her grandmother's house at the cost of 53 cents. So that's about $13 today.
I love how you say the most famous example, of course. Well, we're all familiar with this.
This one is famous because it actually became, the public actually was like, and the general public was like, wait a minute, people are mailing children? Like, this is a thing? And so this was the case that kind of got the ball rolling on like, wait a minute, or should we really be allowing this, and so there was an inquiry over the matter of mailing children, and this the Postmaster General Albert Burleson, he declared that no, we should stop. We should make a rule against mailing human beings. However, that didn't stop people from continuing to do it for about 2 more years. Like the Postal Service, the various local offices continued to accept mailing children.
So there was a rule against it, but people still kept showing up with their children.
Yeah, and so. This kind of just kept going. And like I said, they just, they would put the postage right on their stamps, right on their clothes, just kind of pin them to it and along with the address. And it was actually quite safe though, because you had the mail workers, of course, taking the mail, they would go on the trains with the mail and then carrying it around and stuff like that. So the kids would just accompany them and just sit next to them on the train. And then when they got there, they would have a postal worker, just like, they take the mail to the address. They would just have someone run the kid over to whatever address, and it worked out, I guess.
It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, especially nowadays, if they had, because they have the fancy tracking now, so you can always see where they were.
Was the postal service at this point? I don't know. I don't even know if ours is in the UK. If it's subsidized by the taxpayer, is it in the US or is it a private entity?
No, I'm pretty sure it is. I'm not 100%, but I would say like 90% sure that the US Postal Service is subsidized. Well, yeah, it has to be, because there's always those news articles about like how they're losing so much money and stuff these days.
Okay, because I'm like, if this was a for-profit enterprise, those two, they'd be like, no, this is not happening.
Yeah. Or just like offer, they have parcel post. Maybe they should offer like a human post, like actually have a service.
Yeah, dude, it's called the railway or planes.
Yeah.
Speaking of, have you seen these YouTube videos where I think it was maybe a year or 2 ago, it was a bit of a kind of viral thing where people would mail themselves places. So they would build crates and they would ship themselves on like FedEx. There was one guy, and I think the consensus was this is definitely fake, but he purported to ship himself from the UK to, I think it's Los Angeles. So he puts himself in a box.
That doesn't sound like a good
filming
idea.
His journey. No. And I think people are like, this is definitely fake, because other than all of the like freezing to death logistics, people are like, dude, what happens when you get out of that box and then on your way out, you're going through passport control and they're like, yo, where's your entrance stamp?
Well, and like, what if that box gets like, lots of boxes on it and he can't get out and he's like dying, inside?
That's it. And isn't it super cold?
Well, you'd think aboard those ships, they're probably not like, climate control.
No, dude, he was in a plane.
Oh, they took him on a plane. It wasn't like a shipping container.
Yeah. Well, he's not going to spend like 3 weeks in a box.
Did he know that it was going to be?
Wait, those people definitely do.
Yeah. Like some of them go in shipping containers and stuff, unless they're paying for, that would be an expensive thing to ship if you're
Yeah, no, this dude was definitely on a plane. It was like 48 hours or something he was in this box. It wasn't like weeks.
Yeah, because you imagine like shipping something that weighs like, I don't know, 150 pounds or whatever overnight or something.
But yeah, dude, we should look that up. I'm going to follow up on that next one. Or like look at this video, because I bet it is super expensive, because that's a crate going onto a plane.
Yeah, I would bet like you could probably get a good airline deal somewhere for cheaper, one would think.
It's true. And then you get like, onboard service.
Yeah, and it's like heat. Better than overnight. You're just kind of there, in a few hours.
It's true. And I would think, if you're going to really big crate, that's probably more comfortable. At least you got like a lie flat situation going on rather than economy. Yeah. But no, this dude did not look comfortable at all. It was not a big crate. Anyway, anything more on our early 20th century friends shipping their children?
No, but speaking of mailing things that contain protein, RX Bar, our first sponsor. We have a sponsor.
Wow.
A real sponsor. Which
that was a solid transition. Did you really describe humans as containing a lot of protein, and that's how you're transitioning to?
A lot of humans have an amazing amount of protein, and we need a lot of protein, which is where.
But don't get it from humans. Get it from RX Bar is the message you're saying.
Which does not contain human protein of any sort whatsoever. And in fact, they actually are all about their natural ingredients. This is something, if you look on their ingredients, which a lot of people, I don't know, did you know this? Like the ingredients on labels are in the order of the most prominent in the thing?
I did. And you know why? Because I looked up why agua, or like water. Is it, do you write, we write aqua or agua or whatever it is, instead of water is the number one ingredient on a lot of stuff. And I was like, why do they always list that as number one? It's like the most boring, obvious ingredient. And it's, no, I looked it up because it's the most common ingredient.
Everything pretty much, like even like if you just like some chicken or something, I mean, it's mostly water. If you ever let them dry out, shrinks down to almost nothing. And
well, you buy the cheap chicken in the supermarket, right? And you put it in a pan. Yeah, and it's like, oh, what happened to all my chicken?
Yeah, but yeah, on their ingredients, they do. It's just like, so for instance, I got this coconut chocolate here, and it's just like dates, egg whites, almonds, cashews, chocolate, natural flavors, sea salt, coconut, and note there the natural flavors instead of the artificial, which was kind of their whole point. So I don't know if people know, like this, that's kind of a shady industry, a lot of the nutrition stuff, and so this was kind of their impetus for creation back in 2013 was just to get around this whole problem, because all the protein bars had like random filler and stuff like artificial flavorings and a lot of stuff that...
Please don't say humans.
No humans. Although apparently like sawdust is a thing, like an actual thing in protein bars and protein shakes that they use. Just random stuff like that.
Just to like bulk it out? Yeah,
just exactly. Make it seem so you get heavier, and then you can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit sometimes on like the protein, whether it's actual protein, and because it's a really unregulated industry, so a lot of companies...
And also, if you're an idiot like me, you go to like the store and it's like, there's a protein bar with like 120 grams or a protein bar with 100 grams, and they're the same price. I mean, like, that one's got 120 grams in it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so anyways, that was the point of RX Bar getting their start in the first place, was to make something all natural and actually included, like real ingredients and not like, sawdust as the first ingredient.
Surely they'd write it like, naturally sourced starch compound or something.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, totally.
But if you see that on your protein bars, don't get those. Get RX Bar.
But yeah, no, this was good, because not only is this good for our show because it's getting really expensive, but it's also good.
As we met. Oh, wait, we teased this last week, didn't we? Like about how expensive the show was. It's like, stay tuned for next week's episode for a sponsor.
That's good, because it's not only good, but then, protein bars are good because, I don't know, another quick fact for people who don't know, if you're working out, weightlifting or whatever, or especially if you're trying to lose weight. So a lot of people, when they lose weight, they'll like, they'll just cut back their calories, like in general, and they'll mostly eat a lot of carbs because that's just what's delicious, carbs and fats, and they don't really take a lot of protein. But the problem is you will lose weight, I guess, a little faster in some sense, but you're not just losing fat, you're losing muscle, which is a big problem, because then when you're down, then you try to, okay, now I'm going to go back to eating my maintenance, but now your maintenance is way less because you've lost a lot of muscle, and now you get that like, like that skinny fat look thing. You've probably seen like people who like their weight don't weigh a lot, but they have very little muscle mass, and it just, it's not a good look. You still see the kind of fat even though they don't have much fat type of thing. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. As you know, I've been sort of like been into the fitness nut thing for a couple of years now. So anyways, but the point being, people don't know that you should actually eat roughly around 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of weight, of your weight, or I should say maybe lean mass, but for, so like if you're like a 6-foot guy, you should, probably about 160 grams of protein, 170 grams of protein a day. And that is really hard to do without protein shakes and protein bars, unless you just really, really, really like chicken.
I like chicken. It's all right, but I don't eat it.
Yeah, but
day.
Because a lot of the other protein sources, of course, have a lot of fat and stuff, and so then you're just probably going to eat a lot of extra calories that you don't need, and so that is where RX Bar comes in.
Also, definitely more convenient to have a bar rather than like, I need to cook chicken again.
Yeah. Or when you're out and about and stuff, and for a quick snack and all that.
Yeah, you can't take your George Foreman and some chicken breasts and be like, at the library, I'm just going to whip up some chicken. I don't know why I use the library as an example. Who the hell goes to libraries?
It's true. I don't think that's much of a... I don't know. Libraries do have cool events now. Do you have cool events in like libraries in your end of the woods?
No, honestly, I thought of libraries because I'm at my office, and before I had an office, I used to work in this cool... It was like this awesome academic library for the students in Prague, and it was like £6 a year equivalent to be, or was that like $8 to be a member, and you could go use it for free all the time, and it had ridiculously fast internet, super nice environment. So yeah, and I used to have lunch there, but I couldn't whip up chicken. I'd have to have, nowadays I'd have RX bar.
Yeah, well, you could have an RX bar. And if you'd used our promo code, you could get 25% off your first order at rxbar.com/brainfood. And then enter the promo code BrainFood at checkout.
That sounds pretty good. I know they sent you the RX bar. I want to get myself some RX bar. I know that do they only ship to the US right now? Because I think I'm going to get them to send you some, and then you're going to send them over to me.
Yeah, you should definitely try them. You could see my favorite was actually the coconut chocolate. If people care, they actually have 14 different flavors. So I don't know. Want to ramble? You want to read them off real quick?
Oh, dude, no. We don't need to.
No.
All I need. Well, I guess we actually do need to because it's probably a requirement. But all I need is that peanut butter chocolate and coffee chocolate. Both of those, that's what I need. But for those who are interested in other flavors, because you're not Simon, there's mango pineapple. I'm going to pass on that one personally. Chocolate hazelnut. Oh, yeah. Peanut butter and berries, chocolate sea salt, chocolate coconut, mixed berry, blueberry, maple sea salt, apple cinnamon, mint chocolate, chocolate chip, peanut butter chocolate, and coffee chocolate, and seasonal flavors.
Yes, and if anyone's wondering, my vote, because I have actually tried almost all of them, would be the chocolate sea salt, the coconut chocolate, or anything with peanut butter. They're all good.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You can't really go wrong with peanut butter, so,
I feel you can't. It's just too good. You can't ruin it. All right, so that is, what was that? I'll just give them another rxbar.com/brainfood. Enter the promo code BrainFood for 25% off. Yeah. Thanks, RX Bar.
Whole food protein bars with simple, real ingredients.
That was good, man. You're getting professional at this stuff. Should we leave this behind to move on to our main concept for today's episode? The Savile Row tailors, Burke and Hare? Not really. They did horrible things.
This does involve a lot of protein and dealing with protein as well. From a medical...
Please stop with the human references. RX Bar are not going to like this. Sorry, carry on.
Yes, so Burke and Hare. So in the, I don't know if people are aware, but in a lot of modern history particularly, and in the subject of today, the 19th century, it was really hard to train surgeons, and even just to, if you're a surgeon, you need to practice on human bodies or something reasonably close to a human body. And so, and this was a problem because they couldn't really get bodies. It wasn't like the one way they could get bodies legally was to get it from executed convicts. This was sort of a part of the punishment was to, so you knew not only were you going to get executed, but your body was going to get dissected. And so this was great because they used to execute people for random stuff all the time, like even small stuff.
Well, what was the problem? Weren't there like tons of bodies? People died left and right in the old days.
Yeah, but I suppose if you're dying of random diseases, they might not want to be dissecting you. You wouldn't want to be that person. But no, it actually...
What did he die of? A horrible plague?
I should also point out that no, it was actually illegal to do that as well. There was laws against this around this time.
Even if you donated your body?
Yeah, you could not donate your body at this point. It was illegal, only executed convicts. And there was various religious reasons and stuff for why it was just not considered morally correct to dissect a body. Yes. And so surgeons, this was...
society back in the day.
Yeah, and surgeons at this time, it was not like today, like, oh, a doctor. Like at that point, it was like, oh, a doctor, you avoid them at all costs. Like unless you absolutely have to go, then you go.
And surgeons were more like barbers. Right?
Yeah, barbers were actually, that was a thing. Yeah, totally. For minor surgeries and stuff like that. And so, yeah, and particularly a surgeon, you go to them, you're not having painkillers. So these were people to be avoided, and they weren't, Anyways, back to the point of this is they couldn't get bodies, and so they had the executed convicts. But then as laws started to become a little more humane and less drastic, there was a lot less executions going on. And so then there was a huge problem here of like surgeons needed to train on people, but there was no bodies to train on, or even just general anatomy, just looking at anatomy and looking, where things are in the human body and stuff. So
I love that you've described this in the notes as a huge shortage of human bodies, like highlighted as a major problem. Yeah. And it's like, surely in any other context, this would be bizarre. Yeah. But it's like, oh no, this
tons of dead people, just not dead people, the surgeons and the doctors that the students, medical students could use. And so to get around the problem, there was this sort of like this black market of, they were called resurrectionists and body snatchers. And so they would basically go and right after a person was buried, because the students and stuff, they needed a fresh body. They would kind of sneak in, re-dig up the body, take the body out if there was any valuables and stuff. Of course, they would take those, and then they would take the body over, in the middle of the night and kind of the back alley type thing. And like, here's the body at the medical school, and they pay for it, no questions asked. This was just kind of
it's like all parts of the buffalo, right?
Yeah.
Steal the jewelry, sell the body.
Yeah, and this was actually became such a thing that it wasn't unheard of at all to have where your relatives and stuff, your loved ones, would actually stand guard over your grave for at least a few days until your body would have decomposed enough where the body snatchers wouldn't want it anymore to go take it.
If I was the relatives, I'd be like, I'd just sell direct.
Yeah, right.
Cut out the middleman.
I'm sure people did that, but yeah. So this was a thing, and this actually a little side note. So relatively recently, I don't know, a few years back, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So there was kind of a news story of Ben Franklin, all the bodies found in Ben Franklin's home, like in the basement of his home, the skeleton remains. Great. Yeah, and it was actually he was for a time he lived in London on 36 Craven Street. And so they discovered a lot of bones in his basement, and they're like, what's this about? And so they kind of, the historical societies dug into it, and it looks like it was actually anatomist William Hewson. He set up an anatomy school there, and this was exactly how he presumably got these bodies, because some of them were like children and stuff, and so it was definitely not probably convicted, executed people. And so, but, and that guy, if you didn't know, William Hewson was the first person to describe clearly the three components of blood: red blood cells, white blood cells, and plasma. So that was some of his work. And he actually did a lot of other cool stuff until he died, ironically, of a blood-borne illness, probably picked up from one of the bodies he was working on.
Right, I was going to say, it's like ironic, but also he worked with blood.
And without probably a lot of knowledge of, some of the risks of when he was doing it. So,
like, without a solid knowledge of blood-borne diseases.
Yeah,
but, if you want to learn more about this, we actually got a Today I Found Out video on it. And I think on our YouTube channel, I think this is one of the best clickbaity titles we've ever had, in terms of like, you super want to click on it, but then it totally delivers. And it's like Ben Franklin and the basements in it, the bodies in his basement or something
like that. Yeah, that was good. And so these people and legally selling bodies to medical professionals, it was a thing. And this brings us to William Burke and William Hare, who decided, they kind of took it to the next step and said, let's just skip the waiting stage. Why do you need to wait for them to die?
I don't know. The law.
This just takes a lot longer that way. So let's cut out the middleman there. So from November of 1827 to October of 1828, they went on quite the killing spree, providing a steady stream of bodies to a Dr. Robert Knox. He was a private lecturer at an anatomy or at a university, and he taught anatomy, of course. So Burke and Hare, they actually didn't start out they pretty normal, like they law-abiding citizens, seems like, kind of lower class, but nothing, not like criminal records or anything like that up until this point. Burke was actually, he was in the military, so as a servant to an officer, and Hare was a Union Canal laborer. They were both Irish and found their way into Scotland, where they met when Burke actually came to lodge at, Hare had a lodging house, which he just rented out rooms at. And so, Burke decided to come live there. And, it was at this lodging house that their little thing started. Their crime spree, it started pretty innocently enough. They didn't, so in the very beginning, it was just this old guy named Donald, apparently. I don't know what his last name was, but he owed Hare £4 in rent, and then he went and died. And Hare was like, well, how am I going to get this money back? Well, when they sent the coffin over to put the body in, they just put some sod, or what were they? Bark and steel into the coffin, so it would weigh appropriately. And then they took the body out and decided, they eventually got keyed in to go to Dr. Robert Knox. And
Wait, did they put steel in there, or is that they stole the body?
Yes.
Because you spelt steel like to steal.
That is.
So I don't think they actually put like the metal steel in there.
You are correct.
Be like,
it was bark.
Also, this was the beginning of the 20th century. Was steel?
I'm sure it was.
Steel was a thing
but
then.
Speaking of bark, which is just kind of sawdusty and protein, so it's all coming back. So they took him out. They got to Dr. Knox's assistants at night. They came out and they looked at the body and they said, all right, we'll give you £7, 10 shillings. And I want to know, like, how did they come up with that exact, like 10 shillings? Like, it seems a little odd, doesn't it? Like, not £8, just why 10 shillings?
Maybe they just did it by the pound.
Yeah, something. So anyways, maybe because he was old or something. I don't know. Maybe he was less valuable. So they got more for some later bodies. But that's actually for reference for people. That's about £730 today, or around $950. So a nice little haul
Oh wow! So this Donald, when he died, he owed the man quite a lot of money. Like
he owed it. Yeah, exactly. And they almost got double the money for his body. And this got them.
Mm-hmm.
They go back, and apparently at some point they got the wheels turning in their heads. They were like, hey, wait a minute, why don't we just whenever we have sick tenants who might die, we'll just take care of it, and then we'll make some money on the side.
That's quite a jump from like, this guy died, he owed us money, let's sell the body, to we could kill people.
Yeah, who were sick. That was their rationale at first. They escalated from there, but at first it was they had to be sick, and so this Joseph the Miller was their next victim, and he got sick, and he was quite sick and in a lot of pain, and they were convinced he was going to die. Whether he was actually going to die, who knows? But they thought they'll just put him out of his
so it was kind of like we'll put him out of like a put him out of his misery sort of
he's
thing.
Suffering, and while he's here, at least we can just make some money off this. So they put him out of his misery, and then they did so at least. So they wanted to do it in such a way that that it didn't no violence on the body, because obviously if the doctors or their assistants buying something for someone who's clearly been murdered, they're going to be like, like we normally we do need bodies, but maybe this is taking it a little far.
The old Hippocratic Oath or whatever.
Yeah, so they didn't want to leave any mark of violence on him, so they got him really drunk. And then they just, one of them would pinch his nose, hold his mouth shut, and then when he's passed out, of course, and then the other would lay,
kind of like pass out.
Yeah, exactly. This was their method, as you'll see. They used the same formula over and over again: get them pass out drunk, with free alcohol, and then just pinch their nose, you smother them basically, and then the other one lays on the body so they can't struggle or anything or jerk around, and then that was that. No sign of violence, and it just appears that the person was already ill or drunk, and so maybe they just got overly drunk and died. So this was they went and sold that body, and then they had a string of really healthy tenants at the thing, so they were like,
that's unfortunate for them.
Totally. So they got a little impatient and decided to simply start murdering people.
This all happens within, this is the beginning of the story, and we know this all happened within the course of about a year, right? The whole
it was like that escalated quickly.
So this escalated real fast.
Yeah.
Like you say, they had a string of healthy tenants for a while, like a weekend, and then they moved straight on to murder.
So they just decided we'll start luring people in, and they wanted to lure people in that were first people who were just like basically they wanted people who looked like they would die of natural causes, so like old people or people that just people wouldn't really miss, or if they turned up missing, maybe people weren't too surprised, like prostitutes and things like this at the time. So this is what they were going with, and so the subsequent, we actually have a lot of data from the various stories from the main characters who wrote about what they did, but there are some conflicting accounts, so the exact details are going to vary depending on the telling, but the general gist of what happened next is next up, their next victim was a woman by the name of Abigail Simpson, and she was an old woman who just came to the lodging house, and she was originally supposed to go home that night. She had come to Edinburgh to collect her pension money. She was supposed to go home, but they got her really drunk, and then they were going to kill her. But then it was on this one, they actually got really drunk themselves at the same time. So maybe at this point they were still a little morally conflicted, perhaps.
Or they just like drinking.
Yeah, it could be. And they also just slept through the night. And then the next morning she woke, and then she was about to leave. And so they decided to offer her more alcohol because she had a hangover. And so they got her really drunk again. And then, they killed her and then smothered her same way. They just kind of have the same smothering thing. And then this time, actually, Dr. Knox himself inspected the body, and he gave him £10 for it.
It's interesting, like, as we go through, we'll see how successful they were with this method of getting people pass out drunk.
Yeah.
It's like, if I'm staying in someone's like random lodging house, maybe this is like a 21st century thing. It's like, I like drinking. I definitely drink, but getting pass out drunk is a serious achievement.
Yeah.
That like, I don't think I've ever been pass out drunk, and like I've drunk plenty.
Yeah.
Like this is really like just getting like the amount of success they have with this is quite something. Like the number of people they find who are just willing to randomly get pass out drunk.
Free alcohol, apparently, and so.
I guess.
Yeah. The next person.
But there's definitely diminishing returns on that alcohol. Like the first free beer is fantastic, but by 10 you're like, you couldn't pay me to drink that.
But yeah, so the next victim was an unnamed Englishman, this one, and he was a match salesman apparently, and also came to the lodging house. And so to quote Burke on this one, they
put him out of his misery.
Yeah, and sold his body.
That's becoming a pretty good, oh no, did he cough? Let's put him out of his misery.
He's like, we're doing him a favor. He should be thanking us.
Wow, that toe looks a bit funny. You got an ingrown toenail there. Gotta put him out of his misery.
Yeah, so the next one was an unnamed old woman, and this one was actually lured by Hare's wife, Margaret, who she later, supposedly, she claimed she had no knowledge of what he was up to, but...
how do we know she was... Because
she claimed she didn't know anything about what her husband was doing. However, she did lure the woman in and got her very drunk, and then just so happened to send for Burke and her husband, and then left them alone with the passed out woman. So, yeah, she probably knew what was going on.
She knows what's up.
Yeah, and so then after that one was one Mary Patterson on April 9th, 1828, and Patterson was a 18-year-old, and her friend, actually, Janet Brown, they were both prostitutes, and they're well known around town. They decided to go to breakfast at Burke's brother's house. And then they got Patterson really drunk, and then she passed out. And
breakfast?
Yeah, right.
What's going on in this 19th century?
To be fair, she's, a prostitute. That might be her dinner, for whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so Brown, actually, she held her liquor. She did not pass out. And then so Burke then invited her to a tavern to get her more drunk, and she still didn't become the pass out drunk. And so then he invited her back to his brother's house for more drinks. But then this is where Burke's mistress, Helen Macdougall, comes in, and she shows up, and she sees Burke has a couple prostitutes in the house, and she's, she got upset. And so she
understandably.
Yeah. So Burke kicked her out, but then she was.
They come home like after breakfast. Yeah. He comes home from a tavern at some point after breakfast, super drunk and with 2 hookers.
Yeah.
Probably not going to please his missus.
Yeah. Yeah. So they kick her out, Helen out, and but then she's screaming at the house from outside, and so Brown just decides she's going to leave, but she leaves Patterson there, passed out drunk, and but this was good for Brown. Because this little argument saved her life, but Patterson was not so lucky. She was murdered and sold to Dr. Knox, and and Brown, of course, was like, well, where'd my friend go? She came back later and was like, where is she? And they were like, she left. She'll probably come back later. And so she was like, all right, I'll wait for her then. I'm going to wait for her here. And this is obviously not the safest thing, but she doesn't know this.
Yeah, careful.
Yeah, but luckily for her, once again, her landlady was concerned about the fact that Patterson was missing, and that she was hanging out at the place she was, Patterson went missing at. And so sent a servant to go grab Brown and get her, to leave just in case. And so, that was that for Brown lived, and she continued to ask around town what happened to Patterson. And despite the fact that a lot of the students reportedly actually recognized when they were dissecting Patterson, they had previously hired her, and they were like, they knew who she was, but they did not reveal to anyone, what had happened to Patterson at this point. So, yeah.
Just matter of curiosity. This is so detailed. What's the And this was so long ago. What's the source on this stuff?
Oh yeah, no. The source is one of the primary sources ends up being Burke himself, who this was after he was convicted and everything. So he didn't really have a lot of reason to lie at this point because he was already sentenced to death. Now he does appear to have lied.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, he does appear to have lied, of course, about his wife's involvement. So he says she was not involved at all, and all evidence seemingly to the contrary. But other than that, he doesn't...
She doesn't know. Where's this large amount of money coming? Where are these people? Why are they coming in and never
these
leaving?
people I'm helping you lure in. So this is a lot of the detail actually comes from his. Now, there was, of course, like I said, some conflicting accounts from the different people involved, but Burke is probably the one. He has no reason to lie at this point. He's already convicted. He's already going to die. He knows this. So the others still had reason to lie, as we'll get into in a bit. So, so the next up was a woman named Effie, and she was a beggar woman who actually, at one point, Burke worked as a cobbler, and so she used to sell him like little scraps of leather and things, and so she offered to sell him some scraps of leather at this point, and he lured her in and with some free alcohol, and then murdered her.
He just can't help himself.
And then next, this one was kind of funny. Funny in a darkly way. This woman was already drunk, so they didn't even have to waste money on the alcohol and she was in the process of being arrested, actually. And the police were taking her to jail when Burke comes up and tells the police officer he knows who she is and he's going to take her home. What police officer?
That is brazen.
Yeah. And the police officer, oh yeah, sure, random dude. Here's this drunk woman. Take her home. Like, seriously?
Well, no, I can see that happening. Like, imagine it's present day and the police like are going around London and there's some drunk person on the street who's probably been out and they've just lost their friends. And it's like, all right, you're coming with me. Like, I can't leave you wandering around on the streets causing trouble. So I'm just going to put you in the drunk tank for the night. No charges or anything. Just let them go tomorrow morning. And then someone comes up and be like, yeah, that's my mate. Yeah. He's just, a bit of trouble. Yeah. Let me just take him. And the police officer be like, all right, go on then. I can imagine that. But when it's a woman and it's a random dude, maybe not.
So they did and they murdered.
It's like, wow. It's like, what are you going to do with her? Take her home and put her to bed. That doesn't sound rapey at all.
Seriously. And so, instead they murdered her and sold her once again. And then, and the next one, an old woman and her deaf grandson in June of 1828.
Oh man, it's like, what's going on? It's like, well, we went from like, oh, he was dead. He was sick.
Now they're just random.
People with difficulties.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And this one
next it would be like, well, there was a deaf nun.
This one they were actually trying to lure an old man to their home, to the thing with free whiskey, and he was going. And then they encountered the old woman who asked for directions, and they had, two for the price of one, I suppose, was maybe they're thinking. I don't know. Burke's for directions, and they said, sure, I'll not only give you directions, I will take you where you need to go. But before that, why don't you come in for some free whiskey? Is basically what they did, and the old man left and peeved at losing his free whiskey, and then they probably actually thought the woman would be easier to subdue, perhaps, because this was in some of their other dealings. They were also kind of looking at how easy the person would be to subdue, and so maybe the old woman seemed easier or whatever. So maybe that's why they switched targets, because they did later debate whether they should kill the kid. So they had Margaret and Helen were entertaining the kid in another room while they killed her grandmother or his grandmother. And so they were debating, and then though they thought, well, but if we let him go, he's going to know where his grandmother was, before she disappeared. So they should not, and so they killed him. And but they couldn't, they couldn't get him to drink anything. I assume maybe he was too young or whatever. But so this one was their first where they actually didn't do the smothering thing. They broke his back instead, and then sold the bodies, and got 16 pounds. Yeah, they're really going up in the world with their murderings.
And also, who draws the line at like, well, we will murder people, but we won't give a child alcohol?
Yeah. Seriously, well, I think they couldn't get the kid to drink. Basically, get him to drink. Then there was a Mrs. Osler, similar. In this one, and next one, Anne Macdougall was actually Helen Macdougall, Burke's mistress that we mentioned before. That was her relative. And Burke actually says he did not take part in this one because Anne was a friend.
Okay, wait, but they killed them anyway?
They killed her anyway, yeah, but she was a relative of his mistress, so...
Oh, what, he just got the other dude to do it?
Yeah, he just got the other guy to do it.
Again, who draws the moral line there? It's like, I'm not going to kill her myself, but yo, mate, go next door and knock her off.
I can't...
No, you're still responsible.
Yeah, totally. And then, then there's... Mary Halden, she was also a prostitute and smothered her. And then Peggy Halden, and she was actually Mary's daughter. Yeah. She was Mary, if you notice the same last name, she was Mary's daughter. And she learned that's where her mother had gone. And so she went there, and they first denied that she had ever been there. They were like, we don't serve prostitutes here. And so they said they wasn't there, but then they invited her in for a drink and killed her. And then, it just keeps going. James Wilson, he was a 18-year-old mentally disabled person, and this one was a little bit...
Oh, no, they did. Come on.
And this guy was known around town. He would just stay at whoever would take him in kind of thing, and he was known for his kind-hearted disposition, and he would like to entertain the children in the streets was kind of his thing. And so they basically lured him in, and then they couldn't get him to drink much, but they decided kill him anyways. And this one, because he wasn't drunk and actually, could struggle. And he did, for a time, win in the wrestling match and actually managed to pin Burke down after they tried to kill him. But then, 2 against 1, he lost. And they smothered him. And then, So his mother actually started asking around town what had happened to him. And this was a problem for Dr. Knox because he knew exactly what had happened to him. And so did some of his students recognized him. So what he did is then cut off the head and also kind of dissected the face so it wouldn't be recognizable. And then he also cut off the feet because one of the feet, he had a deformed foot and everyone around town knew that. So this way, if the police did come knocking, they could at least not identify the body. And this starts to think, well, wait a minute, Dr. Knox. Do you actually know what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, how you've got to be suspicious of something.
Yeah, exactly.
If not, by now.
At least suspicious. Like, they get bodies from all over and people who die all the time of random stuff. But like the same people and these same, I don't know, starting to get a little sketchy. And so this brings us to their final murder. Finally,
I feel this point of the story is like the final person they kidnap is Liam Neeson, and he kills everyone and their families and anyone involved and then disappears into the night. But sadly not.
No, but so at this point, Burke is actually no longer living in Hare's lodging house. And this is actually, it seems to be that at some point Hare suggested that they just kill Burke's mistress, Helen Macdougall, for whatever reason. It's not really clear why. And then very shortly after this, Burke and Macdougall move out of Hare's abode.
Yes, after the suggestion of killing his mistress. Wait, so why are we calling her a mistress?
He's married. Did I not mention that at the beginning?
You did not.
Okay, so he had.
Wait, maybe you did.
I think I might have skipped it. So he has a wife and 2 kids in Ireland, but she did not want. Yeah, she did not want to move to Scotland, and so he just left her behind. And he's still married though.
Oh, and never got divorced.
No, he just. He might have even been sending money back with his work. That was a thing people did
with his work.
Yeah,
his work. I'm doing the air quotes so hard right now. So they moved out. And so, and it's thought, but they continued their scheme. So at least it didn't damage their friendship, I guess, maybe. So now, coming back. Hey man, how about we kill your mistress? It's like, no, what? No. I feel that would be damaging to our friendship, but
would be.
At least they kept their business together. Again, business
keep their priorities straight. So this brings us to the last murder. It was a Mary Doherty, and sometimes called Mary Campbell for some reason. She was lured into Burke's new lodging house, and he basically learned her last name. They both had really thick Irish accents, and he was like, "Hey, my mother was a Doherty. We're probably relatives. Why don't you come on and we'll drink and all that." But the problem was when they get back to the lodging house, there's other lodgers there by the name of James and Anne Gray. And they eventually, Burke convinced them Grays to leave and go stay at Hare's lodging house for a time. So, and then he murders Mary.
Oh, so they both set up separate lodging houses.
And so then,
Burke and Hare, now they're separate, 2 separate lodging
and
houses.
so, but then the next day, Anne Gray comes back. She was wanting to retrieve some stuff. The accounts are kind of conflicting on what she was looking for, but it seems her stockings, or others say bag of potatoes. But I feel like the stockings seems a little more reasonable. Like, why would you just come back for a random bag of potatoes? That seems weird.
Yeah.
That's also right next to the bed, which was key here because the body was under the bed at the time, and she saw the body, and then her and her husband alerted the police. But before the police could get back, one thing, Helen, this is another indicating that Helen probably did know what was going on as well. She offered 10 pounds.
This is the mistress, right? Sorry, there are a lot of names.
Yeah, exactly. Helen also seems to have known because she offered 10 pounds to the Grays to keep it quiet. We'll give you 10 pounds a week if you just don't tell anyone about this body that you just saw. So
based on the previous sums, that's like £1,000.
Yeah, exactly. This is a lot of money. Ooh. And but they...
Although they'll probably just kill her, right?
Yeah.
They'd be like, here's your 10 pounds a week.
Totally. Because
they would definitely kill her.
And so they went to the police, and the police came back. But before the police came back, Burke and Hare had already managed to move the body. So there was no body present. So no evidence of, anyone being murdered. The only thing they could learn was that, they learned later, I should say, a witness observed the Burke and Hare carrying a very large tea chest from the house shortly after. Or before the police arrived. Suspicious. Yeah, and the porter at Dr. Knox also confirmed that around the same time they had brought in a a very large tea chest at the thing. So, but the police
at which point Dr. Knox proclaimed, "What?
So,
really?"
At this point, when the police initially arrived, they didn't actually know about this part. So, but they did this. What seems suspicious to them, well, one, the fact that someone had just accused them of murdering someone, but also when they asked, they interviewed Burke and Helen separately, and what they asked them, and they had their story straight about when the Doherty left, but one of them said 7 a.m. and one said 7 p.m. And that's a pretty big discrepancy.
No. That's a big no.
Yeah, and so the police were like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna arrest you anyway, even though there's no body here." And then they eventually did some looking around, and they did find the body at Dr. Knox's classroom, and they became the story. Obviously gets around in the news, and then all of a sudden, a lot of other people come forward and were like, "Wait a minute, I knew someone who was, went to the Burke and Hares and then disappeared." And so this sort of kind of everything started snowballing. And but they didn't really have any real direct evidence. They just had people saying like, "Yeah, I think they were seen with Burke or Hare or whatever before," and so they needed evidence.
Circumstantial's what they call
and
it,
so
right?
there wasn't really.
I've watched enough CSI to know that.
So there wasn't really much to go on to like actually convict them of anything. So presumably, I'm guessing because Burke's lodging was the one that the body was supposedly the last one was at. The Lord Advocate in charge there decided Burke must have been the leader of the two, even though it was from the way it played out, it was probably more like Hare, if anybody, but maybe it was mutual. Who knows? But either way, he decided Burke must be the leader. So he went to Hare and he said, "All right, I'll give you full immunity if you just confess all the crimes and, tell me and give me some evidence against Burke that he actually did this."
I'd be if I was in their position, I'd be like, "Dude, hand me the paperwork.
Where can I sign?"
I mean, we're talking like, you don't want to be a snitch or whatever. But full immunity? How many people?
Well, and at this point in history, where even if
you're going to get hung and dissected, yourself.
Even if neither one of them had done anything, if you're Hare and that you're offered that, you're like, "Yeah, all right, Burke did it. It was all him." Well, why not confess at that point? You get off free either way.
He's like, "I've never heard of these bodies. What are you talking about?" But sure, he did it.
Yeah, exactly. But so Burke was like, I'll sign that. And so, they did. He confessed. And he also actually implicated Helen in this as well. And so this was Burke's mistress,
Wait, he was the one who suggested that they kill her, right?
Yes.
And he seems like the ringleader.
Yeah, and it was at his lodging house in the first place, and he was the one who originally was owed money. So you got to think he was probably the first one who was like, "Hey, this guy owed me money anyway. He died. Let's take him in." And then later, whatever. Either way, Hare signs the deal. Burke then claimed, no, Helen had nothing to do. She knew nothing about any of this. And so, and they didn't really have any evidence. So this was good for her that he did that. She actually did get off scot-free. Well, sort of, as we'll get into. She didn't get convicted of any crimes is the point there. And so Burke was subsequently executed via hanging. And as I said, he did write a full account of their misdeeds. So we have good detail. And at this point, he had no reason to lie. So you can probably say it's, reasonably accurate, pending, human memory being awful. As we always discuss.
Yeah. It's also a way to make Hare's life a bit of a misery afterwards. Like, let's detail everything Hare did so he can really enjoy the rest of his life while the public despises him.
I mean, he did fully confess to all the things he did as well. But he totally was like, Hare, he was in on all this and, everything. So, a little over a month later, after the conviction, January 28th, 1829, Burke was hanged. And this is so weird. Like back then, they actually would have like seats to executions. Like you could get really, really good seats. Like, hey, for the hanging, and you had to pay a lot of money. And this one was particularly expensive because it was such a high profile, like a serial killer type case. And so,
did you do this in the States as well? I think this is quite a thing for a large portion of history.
It was just like a thing to do, like
public execution.
Go to the execution. It was a great fun, great family fun. And then throws.
You did it in the US as well?
Totally.
Because you
totally.
Yeah, okay.
That was the thing. And but apparently the seats were quite expensive here, and the mob was quite unruly. And Burke actually, for his part, when he saw how unruly they were, he actually ran to the noose. It was like, hang me. Presumably, maybe he thought the crowd was going to come rush and do stuff worse than hanging to him, perhaps. So he died. And then he was also dissected, as we'll get into in a moment. But he during the whole endeavor, they apparently made about 160 pounds for all the bodies, about 17,000 pounds today, or about $22,000 for the whole thing. And yeah.
I know that's a lot of money, but for a year's work split between two people, just go get a job. You're going to make it's really hard not to, $11,000 a year.
Back then when it was like you made nothing when you're just a general laborer, you're like barely scraping by.
That's true. I always think, it's put in today's money, but then the economy works very different.
Yeah, definitely a lot of the stuff translates to today's money, but then when you were on that low class, it was like, I can afford bread. That's what I can get. But so
I'm not going to say fair enough, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, so Hare actually was released from prison. He had to stay a little bit longer. They were supposed to just set him free. That was part of the deal. But they wanted to try to find an excuse to keep him in prison. And so they found a law that they could basically detain him until he could pay the cost of his prosecution. And so this was like an old law and it took him 2 months to come up with the money to do that. And then it didn't take long. He was released.
Well, he had all this money for
he was released, and then he ended up, a mob chased him to the King's Arms Inn, and so the innkeepers allowed him to stay because the mob was going to stone him basically, and so they said he could stay the night, and then basically until the crowd went home, and so once they left, he left, and nobody really knows what happened to him after that. He just disappeared to somewhere in the world.
I guess it is back in the day.
Yeah, totally. And as for Helen Macdougall, the mistress of Burke, she was likewise, when she got released from prison, almost immediately attacked by a mob, and then the police had to rescue her, and then she went to England, at which point she was also attacked again by a mob and again saved by the police. And then after that, it's thought she moved to Australia, but it isn't actually known what happened to her after that.
God, it's weird. You can just disappear. Yeah. I guess you can still disappear today.
Yeah, but there's records, someone knows what happened to you, but back then you could literally just disappear.
Right. Today it'd be like, you've got to have at least some
paper trail.
Like you've got to get like a false identity and stuff. Like I wouldn't know how to disappear. Yeah. Like back in the day, it'd be like, is this ship going to Australia? Here's some money. Off you go. Done. New life, new identity.
Yeah. And no one, the news maybe doesn't spread about that all that far. Sure. So and Margaret Hare also met by a mob, and she both actually in a couple places in Glasgow and Greenock. And she fled to Ireland, and then again, who knows what happened to her next? Nobody knows. Dr. Knox.
Dr. Knox.
He had to have been getting a little suspicious at some point, but it was claimed that he didn't know anything about it. Burke actually said Knox didn't know any. We didn't tell him where we were getting the bodies. He was no part of this. So this is one of the. Burke had no.
Oh, come on!
Yeah, he had no reason to lie on.
It's like we never
some
told
other
him,
stuff, but
and that doesn't mean.
On this stuff, Burke could have been lying just to protect the people left. Sure. Yes.
Well, he was happy to string up the other man's mistress for no reason.
No, that was the other way around. That was Hare.
He only had to testify.
That was Hare. Burke was the one that was convicted.
Oh, right.
No, totally.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, and so the Dr. Knox.
Too many names.
Surgeons at this time, of course, teaching anatomy particularly, were not well thought of in the general public. They were kind of looked down upon a little bit, like, immoral and stuff like that. So this did not help Dr. Knox's case. He continued to teach, but a lot of people kept interrupting his lectures, and, crowds coming in and yelling at him and saying he should be, hanged as well. And this was actually not just for Dr. Knox. A lot of doctors, anatomy people, had this problem when people would discover that they had been buying bodies and stuff. It was just, they didn't. There was actually a riot. I can't remember. There was the Resurrectionist riot or something for this very reason. It was just mobs going after the surgeons and stuff. Wow. This was, I don't remember when that happened now off the top of my head, but that was actually a thing at one point. His home was also vandalized a bunch, and then it became a problem teaching, all the people interrupting his class and stuff. So students stopped wanting to take his classes. But he still had good line on acquiring new bodies. And so, they were in short supply. So some students still would go on for a while, but then eventually that went away. And actually the passage of the Anatomy Act of 1832, which happened a little bit after this, partially the change here was spurred by this Burke and Hare thing, was basically they needed a legal way for surgeons and stuff to get bodies so they could get rid of the black market, basically, and stop this sort of thing from happening again. So that Anatomy Act was passed, and then now you could donate bodies and stuff like that. And so then there was actually legal means to get bodies, so doctors stopped, for the most part at least. There wasn't really the need to do the back street deals anymore. So
good news.
Yeah, good news. So Knox no longer had that exclusive thing. So then, he kind of lost his primary source of income there. And then he eventually had to move to London and actually took a job at a cancer hospital and did various research there. But otherwise, yeah. And as for Burke's body, so we mentioned it was dissected as they did to all the executed criminals. And that was at Edinburgh Medical College. And this was actually interesting because you can actually go there to their museum even to this day, and you can see Burke's skeleton and his tan skin.
Oh, dude.
Yeah,
no.
It's there at the Edinburgh.
You can go and see this, or this is just for the students?
I believe it's on display at the Edinburgh Medical College in their museum section. So
I sense a gruesome demonetized YouTube video.
Totally. And even worse, I don't think you can see this one, but the Police Information Center in Edinburgh actually apparently has a card case that's made out of Burke's skin.
Do you reckon if we emailed them, we could go see that?
Maybe.
And, like, make a video about it? I'm not sure I want to see that, though.
Interesting.
Interesting. Edinburgh's nice.
Yeah. And then, the professor Alexander Monroe, who dissected the Burke's body. I don't know did I say that it was a public dissection, actually, which was a little weird?
You didn't. I kind of imagined that it was.
Yeah, this one.
Was that
No,
not
I
common?
don't think so. This one, people didn't really like the whole dissecting thing in general, but this one they wanted to see. People gathered to come see. And the Professor Monroe actually took some of his blood and wrote on a piece of paper.
This is written with the blood of W.M. Burke, who was hanged at Edinburgh. This blood was taken from his head.
Well, yeah.
Wow. That sounds
And what a
professional.
weird thing to write. Like, why? I get the first part, but I don't know. Weird.
This blood was, that's why I gave it kind of this bizarre emphasis, because it is bizarre.
Yeah, totally. And then, from all this, though, there was a various, Burke and Hare was sort of like a thing you tell your children to, like, scare them type of story, like, to get into doing stuff. And then also coined the word burking, which was that's just a term now that people might have heard of, that just for smothering people. If you smother someone, murder them that way, it's called burking. Yeah.
I've never had use for that in my day-to-day life.
No, haven't either. And speaking of coining words...
I'm glad you clarified that, by the way. Yeah, me neither. Never had to
not a thing.
Never had to do any smothering
Never
personally.
heard that
but
one.
Next time I know, it's like, oh, by the way, you know what? This is called
Burking. Well,
burking.
you're standing around the water cooler at work here.
Yeah. People would be like, oh, okay, watch out for that one.
Yeah, so speaking of coining words, did you know there was one guy, his name was Diarmaid Spears, and he attempted to raise his first son, as a native speaker of Klingon.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. Tell me more.
Yeah. So this Diarmaid Spears, you might think this is a little weird, and he must be like a ginormous Star Trek fan, but it turns out not actually. He's just a really big fan of the Klingon language because he's a linguist and with a PhD, no less. And it turns out this is actually a thing with a lot of the Klingon enthusiasts. There's only a few dozen people who are actually considered fluent in Klingon in the world, and then there's thousands more that are kind of semi-fluent. And quite a lot of, especially the really fluent ones, actually are linguists who really, it's not really Star Trek. It's just they're really into constructed languages like this, and this is a culturally popular one. So it's kind of an interesting language.
There's enough Klingon for it to be like conversational.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Exactly. It is. It's a difficult one because you do have to make some stretches, as we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, it is. And new words actually get added to it all the time, even though Star Trek isn't. They're not really like. I don't feel like in most of them they're adding words in the actual shows, but there is actually a group that kind of puts together and adds words to the language and different stuff. I would say probably, but it's more just like within the Klingon language. There's actually a Klingon Language Institute, which is how Dr. Spears got into it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so they kind of control the language and add stuff, and so yeah, it's a full language with all sorts of. You can talk in it, and he thought, I'm going to teach my son to see if so we have this constructed language. Can you make a child a native speaker of this constructive language if you just talked Klingon to them? Yeah. And so this, as a linguist, though, he was well known. He knew well the risks of this. So, for instance, if you don't teach a kid a proper language, like a real language, by the age of around 5 or so, give or take a few years, it turns out this actually will severely stunt the person's mental capacity, and not just right now, but even later, if they're taught a language, they still have learning disabilities and stuff, and quite severe ones in some cases. This is actually why for most of history, deaf people were considered to be mentally deficient, basically, because even when they would learn, they just wouldn't learn it, like, or learn any language early in life until, later you had complex sign languages and stuff like that. And so they were actually mentally deficient because they didn't learn the language. It wasn't that they were native, like they were naturally that way. It was just, they didn't have a language, and your brain needs a language, particularly in those early development stages, to basically drive thought and memory and abstract thought and stuff like that. This is actually one of the problems with people who don't learn the language very early, is abstract thought is they really struggle with, which is, like a thing you do all the time. And to learn new things, you kind of need that.
So it's basically giving you a way of, it's more than just a language, it's a way of thinking, essentially.
It's almost, yeah, exactly like an operating system for your brain to sort of learn how to store memories and stuff like that. And you need it. And if you don't have it, then you end up being very much like, you just have problems with that, even if they do teach you a language later.
Wow.
So you need that. And he was well aware of this, obviously. He actually,
so he could just teach him English as well, though, right?
Exactly. And so this was his plan. His wife would teach, or his wife and other people would interact with him in English. And then he would speak Klingon, only Klingon, to his son. This was sort of his plan. And interesting, a little aside here, something I'm working on right now. It's taking forever. But I was wondering. So everyone says kids learn language faster than adults. Everyone says this, right? And I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and I've been more and more thinking, no, this can't be true, right? And so I've been looking at actually the research that's out there, and it's very much looking like this is not true at all. Adults actually learn language way faster than kids.
Yeah, I mean, how good does your 3-year-old speak
Exactly.
English?
Exactly.
Because I've been learning Czech for 3 years.
And I bet you speak Czech way better than she speaks English. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you think,
like,
even
I'm also working a full-time job. It's not like I'm thinking about like.
And you're not like fully immersed. I mean, you were fully immersed in some sense, but people speak English to you, so you don't.
Yeah, no,
I'm forced to.
For someone who lives in this country, just because of the nature of what I do, I'm just in my office by myself the whole day, talking to you, writing emails in English, presenting videos in English, reading scripts in English. It's all English. And this is a problem because I've got friends who work in Czech companies who've been, who have a different first language, whether that be English or another. And they've learned Czech or have got much better Czech than me because they're just working in Czech all day. They're surrounded by it.
Exactly. And you also have, of course, the benefit of the pre-existing knowledge of language and structure and stuff like that. And so you can pick it up if someone's teaching you very quickly. And if everyone around you is just like, nope, no longer English, we're only going to speak Czech to you, you would advance so much quicker even then. Whereas the kids, I mean, even a 5-year-old or maybe 7-year-old is when they start to become very proficient, that's when they become sort of, not experts even yet in the language, but at least, reasonable experts.
They couldn't somehow say.
Yeah, and so imagine 7 years you're in that same sort of environment where no one speaks but that one language, and you're forced to. How quickly could you, as an adult, learn it? And it turns out, at least, and it's limited research here, and I'm still researching this one, so maybe I'll come across some stuff that says different. But at least for right now, it does very much appear adults learn language way, way faster than kids, contrary to popular belief.
What is interesting is how well. Because there are people I know who've been raised, either were speaking 2 languages. There was one guy I know who spoke 3 languages completely fluently. So like I think he was French, but he was from Belgium, I think. And so he spoke Dutch and French, but his father, I think, was English. Or his mother was American. Because when he spoke English, he sounded like an American. You just didn't know that was not his thing. And then he was like, oh no, I speak better Dutch than I do English. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You sound like a native speaker of English. It's like, but then if you learn a language later, like it's going to take, I don't think there'll ever be a point where people don't know that I'm a foreigner.
Yeah.
Like there are friends who've been learning
there is
language
the accent
for 20
thing. Yeah,
years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the accent thing you do, but to actually learn the nuts and bolts of the language and speak fluently, adults seem to, at least so far. And it's hard to get like an apples to apples comparison. So there has actually been a very limited studies done on, okay, so if we put these 5-year-olds and these, adults in the same learning language class to learn a second language, do the kids then learn it faster? And once again, this one is actually a little surprising. It appears the adults learn faster again, but of course the adults have the advantage of the pre-existing knowledge.
This only seems surprising because we've been told forever that kids learn
Exactly.
language faster. If we look at it objectively, if we didn't have that pre-existing knowledge, we'd be like, of course adults learn faster. We have like discipline and motivation.
And study habits, and we've learned all this.
Exactly. Yeah. If we looked at it any other way, it'd be like, of course. What are you, stupid? Kids are a nightmare.
Yeah, they take forever to learn a language. But yes, now that doesn't mean that there actually is quite a lot of benefits to teaching kids. Lots of studies shown teaching kids multiple languages early on, there is benefits to their learning and stuff like that. But they're not learning it faster is the main driving point. And that seems to be, again, I'm not quite done with this one, but at least that seems to be from everything I've seen so far on the limited studies that have been done. But yes, it is. I just thought, that's what I was just thinking. I was like, this is taking forever for my kids to learn to speak. This can't be true. But so then I decided to look into it. So anyways, that's going to be probably a podcast episode or a video at some point in the coming months, because I thought it was fascinating. But back to Dr. Spears and his son. So he's aware of all this.
Yeah, the Klingon.
Yeah. Yeah. But he wants to see, native speaking. Can I teach my son? He'll be the first native Klingon speaker. And so he actually states of this.
I was interested in the question of whether my son, going through his first language acquisition process, would acquire it like any human language.
Yeah, so he goes on with this experiment, and he had to get creative. Like we said, they don't have a lot of words for a lot of things. So, for instance, the first Klingon word Alec picked up was his son was named Alec. I'm going to go with Hivja.
Sure, yeah, why not?
But probably
it's
like
literally
spoken
a made-up
really
language, so we've probably got some flexibility here.
Yeah, it's probably spoken with a lot like gutturally and like angry tone. Yeah, exactly. That's probably much better, and it means vessel.
You're welcome.
And so so he went with that one for to mean bottle.
The nerdiest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. Well, you'll have more. We got the Klingon Imperial Anthem, which was May the Empire Endure, and this was the bedtime lullaby he would sing to his son. And you can actually, if you go online, I'll include in the show notes a link. You can actually hear Alex singing it as a kid. As his bedtime thing. Wow. So yeah, he had limitations, but Spears noted,
I've been able to say almost everything I've needed to say to Alec in Klingon. One of the reasons I find the Klingon language so interesting is that because the vocabulary and grammar is so limited, you really have to figure out how you're going to say something. For instance, when I ask him to turn out the lights, I say the Klingon for make it dark.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like, so you can see why people still need to add stuff to this language.
Yeah. Yeah, and stuff's getting added every year. There's like an official thing that they do that. But so yeah, this went on for about 3 years. But as you might imagine, like this. Well, I should say first off, during the thing. So when they're out in public, so what is he doing? He's speaking Klingon to his little kid, and he would get a lot of funny looks from people.
Yeah.
And so he would tell him, "I'm speaking Klingon," and then of course, then it turns into not just funny looks, but like dirty looks, like you horrible father. But he's a professional linguist. He knew what he was doing. So so later he said he switched to speaking a constructed language, is what he would say, and then of course probably confuses people because they're a constructed language. What is that?
This guy's clearly smarter than me. I should be quiet.
Yeah, exactly. So but Alec didn't enjoy. Eventually, he didn't enjoy the difficulty in speaking Klingon over versus English, and so this Spears actually thought this was how the whole experiment would end, as he notes.
There is going to come a time when he's going to stop making the effort to speak Klingon because it'll be easier for him to speak English.
Yeah, and also
the
this
make it dark thing doesn't sound easy, does it?
No, yeah, and so he was the only one speaking Alec. Like he didn't show Alec Star Trek, which I don't know. That seemed like it would have been helpful to show him like the Klingon episodes and stuff, so then he could at least someone else speaks it. But he didn't, and so he was the only one. So about 3 years old, Spears stated,
he stopped listening to me when I spoke Klingon. It was clear that he didn't enjoy it, and I didn't want to make it into a problem, so I switched to English. Okay.
Yeah, in the end, Alec just stopped speaking it altogether, and he's now 24 years old, and he's no longer fluent in Klingon, as you might expect, having not spoken it in a couple decades. And he can't even pick out individual words of the language, so he doesn't know it at all anymore, as you might expect. So yeah.
I'm gonna say probably made high school a little easier for him.
yeah, totally. But he did, at least for a very brief time, was the only native speaker of Klingon in the world.
Well, there you go. hang his hat on that. That was quite. How on earth did we transition from the Burke and Hare story to that? You got to remind me.
The Burking.
Oh yeah, the coining words. Like, that was solid. Well done. Yeah, good job. Yeah. Okay, it's easy enough to find these. There's always something. That's a solid.
There's
fact.
always something. Yeah.
That's the end of it today, isn't it?
That's the end.
Shall we thank some people who've left us some lovely reviews?
Yes,
and
we should.
And maybe, do we know what we're doing next week, by the way?
I have a few ideas, but I have not settled on which one. So
Tune in
not
next
really.
week for one of Davin's few ideas. Someone says Chris is a boss. That's very, I'm assuming the user is Chris. That's very, he obviously has a high opinion of himself. I'm going to stop making fun of you, Chris, because you gave us a 5-star review. He says,
nice.
yeah. It's like, Simon, don't be mean to the people who leave us good reviews. Thank you, Chris. You say, I have been listening for about a week now, but I've been watching it, especially someone who's been watching the YouTube channel for over a year. This is a great format for my commuting and doing stuff around the house. I love the tangents you verge into. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Purple Becca 923, another 5-star review. So I assemble pens for a living. Sounds easy, right?
Oh, have we released we haven't released the space pen thing, have we? Not yet.
But by the time
he's gonna like
hears this,
oh, that's true.
She will have heard the one about pens.
She will have, yeah. So
through the magic of radio, podcast, whatever this format. Anyway, sounds easy, right? Sure, but it's also boring AF. You try assembling 2,500 pens a day, and tell me you feel mentally stimulated. That's a lot of pens. Thankfully, I get to listen to music, audiobooks, and podcasts while I work. This show has been one of the most entertaining shows to listen to while I work. Not only does it keep me awake, it gets me smiling and I feel smarter come break time. And I have so much more interesting things to talk about at break, which endears me to my coworkers, so much so that they sometimes buy me lunch. And I attribute that, in part, to this brain food. That's cool.
Have you ever had one of those jobs?
No one ever buys me lunch.
Yeah. Have you ever had one of those jobs that was so like the same repetitive thing over and over and over again? Like,
Dude, yes.
What was it?
I've had a few. I think the classic shelf stacker in the store.
Oh.
That's pretty same. You know, there's only so many times you can read the ingredients list on a can of beans and be like, oh my God, the first ingredient is water.
Yeah. My favorite of those I had was I was a dish loader, and they had one of those automatic conveyor belt things, and it had these little notches. And I got a game, like we had music, that was it, but it was just like endless supply from the university of just dishes coming in all the time. And so I made a game of throwing the dishes. Like, because if you threw them and they give them some backspin and stuff, and if you just hit the notch just right, it would go and then backspin into the thing. And it was quite a fun, like a little, like literally tossing. They're tossing them a few feet and backspin, and you get good at it, and you gotta find ways to enjoy that type of work because it's awful. And now I didn't have podcasts back then, so we weren't allowed to
have our own earpods in, because in case someone in the store wanted to come up to you and ask you for something, so you needed to be like, hi, how can I help you today? I'm so happy to be here and helping you find the corn on the cob. But we also weren't allowed music in the store because they didn't have a license to play music in the store. So it was just silence.
What store doesn't have music? That's like, is that not a thing over there? Because here every store has music.
No, it's not always. It's definitely not always a thing. And there's all sorts of. A friend of mine runs it. He's like he has his own shop, and he was telling me about the nightmare of like licensing and how expensive it is to be able to play the radio in a store.
Really?
So yeah, and even at Christmas we were like, please, can we listen to sing? And like the movement to get music was like a big thing. It was like, please, we're so bored. It's so horrible. Just some music
and that just
would make
seems
a difference.
For shoppers. I can't imagine like shopping for groceries and it's just like silent with people milling about. Like that just seems
that's how it mostly
awkward.
is in UK stores. It's just a lot of like quiet milling and people like saying excuse me to each other. Like,
politely.
Oh, excuse me, pardon me. Can I just reach through here? Excuse me, pardon me.
Yeah, that just all seems very awkward. I think you need some music, some tunes.
Yeah. No, I think like you were also quite isolated. So it'd be like you'd be stacking the shelves in one part of the store, but you wouldn't be doing it with a buddy. Your buddy would be stacking shelves in another part of the store. So you'd kind of be like, all right, well, I'm going to make these beans look super neat.
Oh no, I used to be a janitor at a grocery store, but like at night, so there was no one in the store but me and 3 other janitors, and we each had our sections of the store. We did not see each other all night. Like we could have just died. No one would know. Like literally, I would clear out the freezer, and I was like, what if it actually locked? Like you see in the movies, which is an actual thing. You can just open it. It doesn't actually lock where you get locked inside. But I am in there, and no one would know. No one would find me till the morning if I was, because you just don't see each other, and it's just like complete just walking around. But we did have music. At least we had the music playing over the stores, so that was nice.
Yeah. God, dude, I'm really like, I'm glad I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, totally. I didn't actually.
It'd be really tough to go back to.
It would be, but it was. I would say that job was nice because it was. I mean, if you like peace and quiet, your own thoughts. Podcasts. Yeah. It would be great. They didn't have podcasts back then, again, but so just walking around. Electronics section is always fun to kind of walk, see the new products. As you're pushing the broom.
I don't know. This is at least one of those things where you can at least be left alone in your own thoughts, or you can listen to a podcast or this. Yeah. But I've always done things which were boring and also slightly customer facing. So you couldn't put in AirPods, or you couldn't like fully like zoning out. At least when I was younger, especially, I could just you'd just be like, all right, I'm just going to like turn my brain off for a while and just like look at this cash register. It's like, wow, the number 7 is shaped interestingly.
No, it was great because I didn't have podcasts, but it was at college at the time. So I started actually recording the lectures and just listening back to my lectures. So it was, I didn't do that all night because you can't, your brain gets fried after a while, but you could just, listen back for a while, and then you're just kind of quiet of your own thoughts, kind of just right. And when you go home, you don't have to worry about nothing. You push a broom and, mop and stuff. So it doesn't, it's whatever.
That's true. It's nice. That switching off when you get home is definitely something I miss.
Yeah, totally can't do that now. But the downside is women's restrooms. I don't know if people know this, but everyone always assumes. We talked
about this on the podcast before, right? Did we?
Have we? Because I don't know. I've talked to you about this before. I don't know, but just briefly.
Tell it again. It's a good
women's restrooms. Everyone thinks men's restrooms are the worst. No, it's not even a competition. They are a disaster area, and poop smeared on the walls half the time when you have to clean them. I don't know. Just and blood, as you might expect that one. It's just. And some people, it's like, why would you do that? Why would you smear blood and poop all over the wall? Why? I have to clean that now. And
what is your motivation, dear customer?
What is? I understand the general mess because there's a lot of things women do in the bathroom. Like more than men. Men just go and they go to the bathroom. Women do a lot of things in the bathroom. But so I understand the general mess. But what is the motivation? If there's any listeners who has smeared poop on the wall in a restroom, what's going through your brain? This is something I always wondered.
No. I don't know. Please don't. I don't know how I feel about hearing about
and
this.
the person who made a soccer ball sized ball of poop that wouldn't go down the toilet. What was in your brain? I assume it didn't come out of them that way. I would assume. I had to break that apart to get it to flush.
This is not right. It's not right.
Every night it was something new in the women's restroom. The men's restroom is fine.
QBF 6620 says not enough tangents. I'm stopping this nonsense. I don't want any more. I listened to this for the meandering. This is not the best review to reveal after Dayon has spent time talking about poop footballs. Y'all are excellent when you get off topic. We need more tangents in all caps. Thank you, QBF6620. I'm going to roll into another review before David can kick off about some more toilet talk. Love it. From Mickers95, 4 stars. I wanted to catch up to the most current before I wrote a review, and now have done so. Thank you for listening to the More Makers. I love your more casual approach to the podcast versus your all business theme on the tubes. Love the rabbit trails and random banter. Do try to split up the episodes, though. As much as space is awesome, I'm really getting tired of it after 5 episodes. Not that you shouldn't do more in the future, but variety is the spice of life, boys. More puns. You guys make my week in rural northeastern Oregon. Thanks a bunch. Hoping for a lot more. Also listen on my phone and I missed the whistle. 4-star as is 5 out of 5 stars if seasons of a topic become shorter to 2. 1 main story or whatever and 1 bonus fact section. If there is content for multiples, if you choose to read on a podcast. If there is content for multiples, if you choose to read this on the podcast, feel free to edit I trust you. You guys are absolute legends and heroes, and I worship you. That was my edit, that last sentence. He said I could feel free to edit, so I added just an entire sentence of praising. Legends and heroes. So I think that's enough reviews for this week. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Good.
I kind of agree. Like, I think 5 in a row or 6 in a row, whatever it was for space,
it was
a bit
little
lengthy.
Yeah, that's what
we can always record them as one session and then or like as in a row, and then we can just splice them in.
When we post the final 2, I was just going to post them like at the same time type of thing, just so it's like, all right, this is done now, everyone.
Be also good for our ranking in iTunes.
Yeah.
More episodes, more rank. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the business side of podcasting. This episode's pretty long. Are we? Is there anything else you want to add? Anything I need to hit?
Please support our sponsor, RX Bar, because this is really expensive. So it'd be nice if they came back.
Yes, we would like that. And you can do that at rxbar.com/brainfood. Use the code brainfood on checkout to enjoy 25% off. And it's a way better way to get protein than the inconvenience of chicken. And also, I'm not going to make a joke about human flesh because they probably won't like that. But rxbar.com/brainfood.
Not human flesh. In fact, natural ingredients that aren't natural human protein, but rather things like almonds and cashews and peanuts and dates and various fruit.
Once again, no human flesh. RxBar. I hope they approve this. And thanks to them for sponsoring. Seriously, it is good. Dave got it shipped. I want to get some myself. It's just a better way. All right, we'll be back next week with another episode of Brain Food. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to give us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And that's all, folks. Come to Burke and Hare for the finest in gentlemen's wear.